The water in the sacred fountain steamed in the cold morning air, and Wren was elbow-deep in it, scrubbing mange salve out of a shivering pup's fur, while 2 more pups waited in her basket, sneezing lavender bubbles. She was breaking the oldest law of the Silvercrest pack. She knew it. The fountain was for royal blood only, blessed by the moon, forbidden to a wolfless Omega who set hound bones for her supper. But the pups had fever mites, the creek was frozen, and this water ran warm all winter. So here she was, whispering apologies to a goddess she hoped was busy elsewhere. She did not hear the black wolf come out of the pines behind her. I was enormous, big as a plough horse, black as a chimney flue, with 1 torn ear, and eyes the color of banked coals. Any wolf in 3 kingdoms would have dropped to their belly at the sight of him, because any wolf in 3 kingdoms would have known exactly who he was. How was Alaric Thornmore, the Alpha King, the man who had unified 7 packs with his teeth, who had made grown warriors faint by raising 1 eyebrow, and who was at this precise moment watching a small Omega commit a capital offense with a pup tucked under her chin like a loaf of bread. I should announce myself, he thought. I should shift, stand at my full height, and inform her that desecration of a moon fountain carries a sentence of exile. That is my duty. That is the law. I wrote the law. The pup in Wren's hands sneezed. A bubble popped on its nose. Wren laughed, a small cracked sound like she was out of practice, and kissed the wet spot between its ears. The Alpha King sat down in the snow. Just for a moment, he told himself, just to gather evidence. He had come to the border territories in wolf form to hunt rogues, unannounced, the way he did every winter, because a king who is never seen coming learns the truth about his lands. He had been about to turn home, and then the wind had brought him warm water, wet dog, and lavender, and something underneath the lavender that made the wolf in his chest sit up like a hound, hearing its own name. Mate, said the wolf. Absolutely not, said the king. Wren lifted the clean pup out of the fountain, wrapped it in a rag that had been washed so many times it was more hope than fabric, and reached for the next one. That was when she finally saw him. A black mountain with eyes, sitting in the snow 10 feet away, watching her. Most people, upon meeting a wolf the size of a shed, scream. Wren looked at his torn ear, at the way he held his left forepaw slightly off the ground, and said, "Oh, you poor thing, you're hurt." I was not hurt. He had stepped on a pine cone. But when a small woman with chapped hands and lavender soap comes towards you, saying "poor thing" in a voice like warm bread, a king discovers he is capable of limping. He limped magnificently. "There now," she murmured, kneeling in the snow in front of the deadliest creature on the continent, taking his massive paw in both hands, like it was a robin with a bent wing. Her fingers were freezing. Her thumbs pressed gently along his pad, checking for splinters, and the Alpha King, who had once sat motionless through an assassination attempt, trembled. "Nothing broken," she said. "Bruised, maybe. You're lucky. Do you belong to someone?" Yes, he thought, staring at her. Apparently I do. He meant to leave that night. He wants you to know that. He stood at the tree line for a full hour, telling himself that he was the Alpha King, that he had a council meeting in 4 days, that he did not need to watch a strange Omega Bank, her tiny fire in a lean-to, with 3 pups in her bed and a gap under her door you could throw a cat through. Then she coughed in her sleep, and he thought one night, for security purposes, and lay down against the gap under the door so his body blocked the wind. I planned to stay one night. He was wrong. Here is what the Alpha King learned in the days that followed, conducting what he described to himself as an extended tactical observation. Her name was Wren, because he heard the Pups owners say it when they came to collect their animals. She was the bone setter for the border pack's hunting hounds, which meant she was paid in turnips and insults. She boiled willow bark until her lean-to smelled bitter. Splinted legs with straight ash sticks, she sanded herself and stitched wounds with silk thread. She unraveled from the one fine ribbon she owned, an inch at a time, so that the ribbon got shorter every season. She had never once been invited to the moon feast. He checked. 5 years of feast lists nailed to the meeting hall door, and her name was not left off with malice. It was worse than that. Nobody had ever thought of her at all, and she talked to him. That was the dangerous part. She talked to the giant black wolf, who kept appearing at her fountain like he had nowhere better to be, which, increasingly, he did not. "You again," she said on the 3rd morning, and the king's heart did something undignified. "I don't have meat. I have turnip stew, and I'm not sorry. It's good stew." He ate the turnip stew. He, who had a palace chef from the southern coast, ate turnip stew out of a cracked bowl on the ground, and when she wasn't looking, he licked the bowl. The thefts began in the 2nd week. It started with her washing. Wren hung her spare shift and her wool stockings on a line between 2 pines, and in the morning 1 stocking was gone. She searched the snow. She accused a magpie. 3 days later, the stocking reappeared on the line, mysteriously clean, smelling faintly of pine and something wild, and folded. Folded. Wren stood there, holding a folded stocking, looking around the empty clearing, and said out loud, "Am I losing my mind?" 40 miles away, in the war camp, where the Alpha King was supposedly inspecting troops, his beta, a dry-voiced veteran named Corvin, held up a long black hair he had found on the king's cloak. It was not the king's hair. It was wool. Stocking wool. "Sire," Corvin said, "there is knitting on your cloak." "There is not. It is grey, sire. It appears to be from a lady's stocking." "I was attacked," said the Alpha King, ruler of 7 packs, "by a clothesline. The matter is handled. We will not speak of it again." Then came the gifts, because a wolf cannot court properly without gifts, and the wolf had opinions. The king argued with him about it. "This is beneath us," said the king. "She had turnip stew again last night," said the wolf. She unraveled more ribbon. "Bring her the pheasant." The king brought her the pheasant. He set it on her doorstep at dawn, arranged nicely, and then hid behind the woodpile like a criminal to watch her find it. And when she pressed both hands to her mouth and looked around the clearing and called out, "Thank you, whoever you are, you strange, wonderful beast," he had to bite his own foreleg to keep from making a sound. By the 3rd week he was sleeping inside. I would like the record to show that this was her idea. A storm came down off the mountains, the kind that turns breath to needles, and Wren opened her door and found him lying against it. Snow drifted up his back, and she said, "Oh, for goodness sake, you enormous fool, get in here," and hauled at his ruff with both hands, and he let a woman half his weight drag the Alpha King across her threshold like a rolled carpet. Her bed was straw and 1 thin blanket. He lay down beside it, a wall of black fur between her and the door. Sometime in the night, the cold got cruel, and she rolled over, half asleep, and burrowed into his side the way the pups burrowed into her, and mumbled into his fur, You smell like the forest before rain. The Alpha King lay awake until dawn, absolutely still, thinking I am the most powerful wolf alive. And if I move, she'll stop, so I will never move again. This is fine. I live here now. In the morning he was gone before she woke, because a king has appearances to keep. And that afternoon, a rider arrived at the border pack with an announcement that made every wolf in the territory stand up straight. The Alpha King himself was coming, in person, to inspect the border defenses and take counsel on the rogue attacks. He arrived in human form, on a black horse, in a black cloak, with a face that had made a foreign ambassador burst into tears the previous spring. The whole pack assembled in the square, heads bowed, hearts hammering. Wren stood at the very back, behind the hound kennels, because omegas of her station were not invited to stand anywhere, and peered between two fence posts at the legendary Alpha King, and thought privately, he looks tired. Someone should make that man some stew. He smelled her before he saw her. Lavender, cutting through 100 pack scents like a blade through wool. His head turned. His eyes found the gap in the kennel fence, and one grey eye peering through it. And for 3 full seconds, the Alpha King of the 7 packs forgot the word he was in the middle of saying. The border Alpha, a thick-necked man named Gareth, followed his gaze and cleared his throat, embarrassed. Just the bone setter, sire. Wolfless girl. Pay her no mind. Wolfless. There it was. The word the pack used for her. Because in 19 years, Wren's wolf had never come, and a pack forgives poverty and forgives plainness. But it does not forgive that. I pay mind, said the Alpha King, in a voice like a door closing, to everything in my territory. They gave him the finest guest lodge. That night, the finest guest lodge stood empty, its bed untouched, while a giant black wolf trotted through the pines with a honeycomb held delicately in his jaws, a courting gift of the highest order, and the king inside him said, "We are risking everything." And the wolf said, "She likes sweet things. I have seen her scrape the sugar jar." And the king said, "That is an excellent point. Walk faster." The near disaster came 10 days later, and it was the fountain's fault. Wren had a new patient, a hunting hound with a shoulder torn open by rogues, fevered and dying, and nothing in her kit was touching the infection. So at midnight, she wrapped the hound in her blanket, put it on her sledge, and dragged it to the sacred fountain, because the warm water had cured fever mites, and maybe, she was kneeling in the forbidden pool with a dying dog in her arms when the torches came through the trees. A border patrol. 6 warriors. And with them, because he had insisted on joining the night patrols, personally, for security reasons that were definitely not lavender-related, the Alpha King in his human form. The patrol leader saw her and inhaled to shout. Sacrilege in the king's own presence. Exile, at minimum. The Alpha King looked at Wren, soaked to the waists, arms full of dying hound, eyes huge with terror. He looked for a long, long moment. Then he turned to his patrol and said, "I see nothing. Sire, the fountain. She's in the—" "I see," said the Alpha King, with the full weight of 7 packs behind every word. "Nothing. The fountain is empty. Your eyes are tired, soldier. All of your eyes are tired. We will continue east." 6 warriors looked at the Omega standing waist deep in the most sacred water in the kingdom. 6 warriors looked at their king's face. 6 warriors decided, as one man, that they had never seen anything in their lives, and marched east. The king walked past the fountain last. He did not look at her, but quietly, so quietly only she could hear, he said, "The hound, willow bark won't cure that. Pack yarrow into the wound after the water. Deep," and he was gone into the dark. And Wren stood in the steaming pool with her heart pounding, thinking, how does the Alpha King know field medicine? And why do I feel like I know his voice? And above all, why did he smell? Just faintly, underneath the leather and steel, like the forest before rain. The hound lived. The winter deepened. And Wren, who had never in her life had anyone to talk to, discovered the terrible luxury of a listener who could not repeat a word. "I'm going to tell you something," she said one night, lying against the black wolf's side while sleet ticked against the roof. "And you have to take it to your grave. Do you understand? Because you're the only one who won't laugh." The wolf did not move. Inside the wolf, the king stopped breathing. "They call me wolfless," she said, "but that's not true. I feel her. My wolf. She's in here." Wren pressed a fist against her own breastbone. "She's just quiet. When my mother died, I was 7, and the pack put me in the kennels to earn my keep. And I think my wolf looked at all of it and decided the world wasn't safe enough to come out into. And you know what?" Her voice went thin. "I never blamed her. I never once called her. Because if she came out and the pack still didn't want us, then it wouldn't be the wolf's fault anymore, would it? It would just be me." The Alpha King lay in the dark with her fist against his ribs, and understood that he would burn down anything at all, that had ever made this woman feel that way, and also that he could never, ever tell her that a king had heard this because she had given it to a wolf. A wolf could keep it. A king would have stolen it. For the first time, leaving her lean-to at dawn felt like tearing skin. Then spring came, and with it, Prince Rowan. He arrived from the Eastern Pax to negotiate an alliance, and he was, the Alpha King was forced to admit, aggressively pleasant. Golden-haired, easy laugh, the kind of man who remembered kennel hands' names. And on his second day, his prize falcon broke a wing, and someone said, "Take it to the bone setter." And Prince Rowan ducked into a lean-to that smelled of willow bark and lavender, and came out an hour later half in love and fully impressed. "Your bone setter," he announced at the king's own council table, "is wasted here. Wren, her name is. Cleverest hands I've ever seen. I mean to offer her a healer's post at my father's court. A salary. A cottage. Perhaps." And here he smiled his easy smile. "More than that in time. Is she spoken for?" Several things happened at the council table. A wine cup, held in the Alpha King's hand, developed 5 distinct dents. The fire in the hearth leaned sideways, as if in a wind, though there was no wind. And every wolf in the room felt the temperature of the king's presence drop through the floor. "She is," said the Alpha King. "Oh, by whom?" Silence. The king's jaw worked. He could not say a wolf who folds her stockings. He could not say me, because to her there was no me. There was a cold-eyed monarch she had seen twice, and a large dog she fed turnips. "By her patience," he said finally, through his teeth. "She is indispensable to the border pack's hounds. The matter is closed." It was not closed. Prince Rowan, being pleasant and golden and completely unable to read a room, visited the lean-to again. He brought honey cakes. He sat on her one stool and made her laugh, actually laugh, twice. And outside the window, a black shadow, the size of a hay wagon, lay in the tree line, generating a growl so low it registered mostly as dread. He gave her the falcon's tail feather when it healed. She put it in the jar by her bed. That night the wolf came to her door and stood there, stiff, refusing his stew, and Wren put her hands on her hips and said, "What is wrong with you?" And the wolf looked pointedly at the feather jar and back at her, and Wren slowly, delightedly, began to grin. "You're jealous. You great black thundercloud. You're jealous of a feather." Well, the wolf turned his back on her with tremendous dignity. "He's just kind, you know," she said to the wolf's back, softer now. "The prince. And I'll admit, no one's ever offered me a cottage before. A salary. It'd be a life." She was quiet a moment. Sleet again, ticking on the roof. "But he doesn't smell like rain." The wolf's ears swiveled around before the rest of him did. "Don't let it go to your head," she muttered, and dropped her hand into his ruff, and the Alpha King decided that Prince Rowan could live. It was Lady Maren who ended it. Lady Maren was the Border Alpha's sister, and she had spent 2 years positioning herself to be presented to the Alpha King as a lunar candidate, and she had watched, with growing and expertly hidden fury, as the king visited this insignificant border pack again and again and again, for reasons no map could explain. She was not stupid. She followed the patrol's silences backward like a scent trail, and on a grey evening in early spring, she stood in the trees and watched the wolfless bone setter bathe 2 orphan pups in the sacred fountain, humming, as if the law were a curtain she could simply walk through. Maren stood there longer than she needed to. Here is the thing about Lady Maren that no one in the pack knew. She'd had a younger sister once, born small, born quiet, a girl whose wolf never came. And one winter, the pack had looked away from that girl, the way packs do. And by spring, there had been a small cairn by the river, and Maren had built most of it with her own hands, and never spoken of it again. So for one long moment in the trees, watching a wolfless woman wrap a pup in a rag with more tenderness than Maren's own mother had ever shown anyone, her resolve cracked straight down the middle, and she almost turned and walked away. Then she thought of the crown, and the years, and everything she had swallowed to get this close, and she went to the council instead. The tribunal was held at dusk in the square, the whole pack assembled, because sacrilege demanded witnesses. Wren stood alone in the centre, with her chapped hands folded, and the charge was read, repeated desecration of the moon fountain, and the sentence proposed was the old one. Exile through the Black Reach Gorge. At night. Alone. The gorge where the rogues denned. The Alpha King was 40 miles away at a treaty signing when the rider reached him. Witnesses at the treaty table would later swear the ink was still wet when the king's chair hit the floor. Wren walked into the gorge at moonrise because she would not weep in front of them, and she made it half a mile before the rogues found her. 5 of them, scarred and starving, spreading out across the rocks in the practiced silence of things that have done this many times before. Wren backed against the cliff wall with her skinning knife, 4 inches of steel against 5 wolves, and heard her own heart beat, and thought absurdly of turnip stew going cold on a hearth. The first rogue leapt. It did not land. Something huge and black hit it out of the air like the fist of a god, and the gorge exploded into snarling, and Wren pressed against the rock and watched her wolf, the stew thief, the stalking bandit, the great soft thundercloud who let pups chew his ears, take apart 5 rogues with a cold precision that no pet had ever possessed. It was over in a minute. It felt like an hour, and when it ended, the black wolf stood in the middle of the gorge, bleeding from the shoulder, chest heaving, and turned to look at her. "You're hurt," she whispered, starting forward, hands already reaching, because that was who she was. That was who she had always been. "Come here. Let me." And the wolf, swaying, losing his grip on the shape the way a wounded wolf does, shifted. The black fur poured away like water, and standing in the gorge, bleeding from the shoulder, wearing the moonlight and an expression of profound, cornered guilt, was the Alpha King. Ren stopped. She looked at him. He looked at her. Somewhere far above, an owl asked its question, and got no answer. "Ren," said the Alpha King, in the voice of a man walking onto very thin ice, "I can explain." "The stew," she said. "Yes, the stocking. I folded it," he said, as if that helped. "The pheasant, the honeycomb." Her voice cracked upward. "The storm, the whole winter. You slept in my bed." "Beside your bed," said the king, and then, honesty being the only thing he had left, mostly beside it. "You're the Alpha King." "Yes, I fed the Alpha King turnips. They were excellent turnips, I told you," Ren said, and now her voice went quiet, and the quiet was so much worse than shouting, "About my wolf, about my mother." Things I have never said to a living soul, because I thought I was saying them to a creature who couldn't judge me, couldn't repeat them, couldn't sit at a council table knowing them. And the whole time, it was you. A king. You let me pour my whole heart out onto the floor, and you sat there and let me. "Ren, don't." She held up one hand, and the Alpha King of 7 packs, who had never obeyed anyone in his life, stopped. "You saved my life tonight, and I'm grateful, and I am so angry at you I can't see straight, and I need you to not follow me right now. Not as a man, not as a wolf. Do you understand me?" He did the hardest thing he had ever done. He stood still, bleeding in a gorge, and watched her walk away. She went to the fountain. Of course she did. It was the only place in the world that had ever been kind to her, and it was warm, and she sat on its rim in the dark for 3 days' worth of one long night, and somewhere before dawn, furious and heartbroken, and finally out of reasons to be careful, she pressed her fist to her breastbone and said out loud, for the first time in 19 years, "Fine. Come out then. It can't get any worse." And in the sacred water's rising steam, something that had been waiting since she was 7 years old uncurled and stretched and answered. The pack that assembled in the square 3 days later came to see a sentencing overturned. What they saw instead was this: the Alpha King, arm-bound, standing before the whole assembly, confessing to crimes. "The charge is desecration of the moon fountain," he said, and his voice carried to the last row. "I am here to enter evidence. On the 4th night of midwinter, I drank from that fountain in wolf form. On the 9th, I lay in it to soak a wound. I have entered its waters." He consulted nothing, needed no notes, 11 times this winter. "If entering that fountain is sacrilege, your king is the most sacrilegious wolf in the territory, and you will sentence us together, or neither of us at all. Furthermore," he turned slowly and found Ren where she stood at the edge of the crowd. "I confess to theft. 1 wool stocking returned. 1 silk ribbon, which I have not returned, and will not, because it smells of lavender, and I am a weak man. I confess to fraud, in that I accepted charity stew under false pretenses on some 40 occasions. I confess that the laundry thief, the pheasant, the honeycomb, and the large black dog, who has been sleeping against a certain door all winter, were all, every one of them, me. The square was so silent you could hear the fountain running, 200 yards off in the pines. "And I confess," said the Alpha King, "that the law of this pack let a 7-year-old girl be raised in a kennel and called her wolfless, and never once put her name on a feast list. And I signed that law's inheritance every year I wore this crown. That is the desecration, not the water. The moon put that fountain here to heal, and in 20 years, exactly one person in this territory has used it for its purpose." His voice dropped, and somehow got larger. "She is mine, if she will have me. And whether she has me or not, she is under my protection until the sun burns out, and the next wolf who speaks the word wolfless in this square will explain themselves to me personally." Every head turned to Wren. Wren, who had spent her whole life at the back of every crowd, walked to the front of one. She stopped in front of the Alpha King and looked up at him for a long moment, and the whole pack held its breath. 40 bowls of stew," she said. "At least you'll be paying that back for years." "I had hoped," said the king, very carefully, the way a man handles something that might still fly away, "for decades." And Wren, in front of the entire assembly, took his face in her chapped healer's hands and kissed the Alpha King. And the roar that went up from the pack sent every bird in the pines into the sky at once. And if, when she pulled back, her eyes flashed silver, the bright, unmistakable silver of a wolf who has finally decided the world is safe enough, well, the pack would be talking about that part for a generation. Lady Maren left the territory that same week, before any judgment could be handed down. She asked for no audience and made no apology. But the morning she rode out, the keeper of the orphan den found a bundle left inside the door with no note. It was a child's blanket, decades old, carefully kept, edged in a river pattern that no one in the pack recognized, and folded with the kind of precision that only comes from hands that have folded it many, many times. Wren, when she heard, sent no hunters after her. She sent by the next eastbound trader a small jar of lavender salve, also with no note. Some accounts can only be settled in that currency, and both women knew it. Prince Rowan attended the mating ceremony, cheerfully, and got extremely drunk, and told everyone within earshot that he had seen it first, which was not true, and the Alpha King let him say it anyway, which everyone agreed was tremendous personal growth. The ceremony itself was held over the strenuous objections of the protocol master at the fountain, and that is where you may find them still, if you come through the border pines on a cold morning when the sacred water is steaming. The fountain is not forbidden anymore. There is a law, the first one the new Luna ever put her name to, and it is 1 sentence long, and it says the water is for whoever is hurting. This particular morning, the Luna of the 7 packs is elbow deep in it, scrubbing lavender soap out of an orphan pup's fur, while 2 more wait in the basket, sneezing bubbles. A wolf the size of a plough horse lies along the fountain's rim, with his great black head in her lap, eyes shut, one torn ear twitching in his sleep. The smallest pup, the runt, has escaped the basket. It climbs the mountain of him, slipping twice, and burrows into the warm curve of the Alpha King's throat, and seizes the royal ear in its needle teeth, and begins with great seriousness to chew. The most feared wolf on the continent opens one eye. He looks at the pup. He looks up at Wren, who is watching him with soap on her chin and one eyebrow raised. I sighs, closes his eye, and lets it happen. "That's what I thought," says Wren, and rinses the next pup, and the steam goes up into the pines, smelling of lavender and rain.